everyone. My name is Ria, and it's a pleasure to present to you our policy reform proposal. To make or break a single market, give capital a chance, amend the TFEU. To give you a brief overview regarding the structure of our presentation, we will begin with an introduction to the Capital Markets Union and its intended benefits for the European Union. Victoria will then explain the current state and challenges to the implementation of such a union, followed by Christopher with our proposed policy changes. Finally, Alex will explain the expected outcomes of the implementation of such an amendment for the European economy. So, what is the CMU? Since the beginning of its mandate, the Juncker Commission listed amongst its priorities the integration of national capital markets across the European Union. With the conclusion of the Commission Action Plan on building a capital markets union and the launch of the Market Unions Initiative, the fundamental elements of the CMU were set up. Despite the progress made during the recent years, a genuine CMU remains far from being achieved. A CMU would bring several benefits to member states, including but not limited to providing better choice of funding for businesses, creating a more inclusive economy, and reinforcing EU's global competitiveness and autonomy. We hope that the implementation of our proposed amendments would be a catalyst for change in the EU, pushing us towards a stronger, more resilient banking system. Victoria will now explain the challenges faced so far in achieving such a CMU.
Despite several legislative measures and action plans, the progress of the last 5 years can be questioned, and a genuine CMU remains far from being achieved. The roadmap and the illustration in the slide show how slow and fragmented the progress towards the achievement of real CMU still is. First, there's too much fragmentation among EU member states. We have conservative member states against go-getters member states, and there's also fragmentation in between EU institutions, such as the Commission and the Parliament. There's political disagreement and divergence in visions. There's also the potential emergence of mega players and thus the consequent loss of market for others. There are still structural issues, such as an only partial fiscal union and the only partial adoption of the common currency. Lastly, there's too much risk aversion. In other words, capital markets remain underdeveloped and lag behind when compared to certain non-EU jurisdictions, leading to a heavy reliance on bank funding within the EU, limited choice for businesses, institutional investors and consumers, and to limited private risk sharing. So, what is the current state? Many key performance indicators visible in the slide are moving backwards, suggesting the more radical changes needed. In particular, the graph highlights the major problem areas, which include, but are not limited to, the degree of simplicity companies in the EU find entering and raising capital on public markets, the amount of savings from retail investors deployed in capital market products such as bonds, equity share, investment funds, and pension funds, the capacity to transform bank loans into capital market instruments, the degree of simplicity startups, small and medium enterprises, and non-listed companies find when assessing risk capital finance, and the level of capital markets integration within Europe and with the rest of the world. In light of the challenges and the backward-moving progress, change is needed. Our first policy recommendation consists of a treaty change to the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union that will then allow for a more converged expertise. We propose to strengthen the Economic and Financial Committee with finance-related supervisory agencies. A truly integrated capital market in the European Union requires a more integrated and convergent supervision than is currently the case. Further harmonized legislation requires a wide variety of in-depth expertise. This is currently occurring at the evidence-based level. EBA, ESMA, or EIOPA are often consulted or provide the basis to the Commission's impact assessment, but many other stakeholders, such as the ECB and the High-Level Forum, have called for a clearer and strengthened supervisory convergence. Our proposed treaty change would merge their competence in order to provide a forum for cross-sectional knowledge, a basis and a foundation for the CMU progress.
To bypass the opposition of some member states and to act in accordance with EU jurisprudence tradition, referring to the formation of new law based on precedent, our second proposal is to create an imbalance in the treaties. The imbalance will cascade into further integration of the CMU, while at the same time pushing the member states to regulate the spillover effects. The intended effects of this imbalance would be triggered by an amendment to the TFEU, Article 65, which will allow private investments to taxation by other member states if the investment is placed within the European Economic Area or the EEA. Some countries would bring higher returns on investments while being riskier. Ultimately, this will trigger a pan-continental taxation conundrum, which will push member states either towards bilateral investment arrangements or act as a true single market and establish common norms to rebalance the situation. The benefits of this rebalancing act would spill over across the EEA, resulting in significant incentives for the Council to act on this. Investors seeking higher returns through riskier investments would also in turn support capital-intensive programs like the Green Deal.
For the green transition and for the post-COVID recovery, the European Union is seeking to invest about 1.7 trillion euros. However, that's just a small amount. It's taken per annum about a quarter of intra-EU FDI in 2018 numbers. In 2020, the totality of insurance deposits in the European Union were estimated at 10 trillion euro. In other words, if we managed to dislodge what is currently blocked behind national protections and barriers, we would potentially get up to 10 times the amount of money that the European Commission is trying to use as seed to unblock Europe's investment potential. The safety sought by investors within EU barriers is visible by the fact that in 2018 numbers, about 50% of Europe's FDI was coming from outside the European Union. It is also visible in the fact that in international investment forums and flows, it is still the US dollar that reigns supreme and the yuan is picking up. In other words, Europe could be using a tremendous amount of money that is currently not productive and possibly put in banks for negative rates in order to fully boost its growth, its green transition, and possibly also invest in their partners' green transitions and the recovery post-COVID. This would give it unparalleled geopolitical clout and higher returns for the investments than what is currently available by mere placement with European banks or pension funds.